Opening up the king's diagonal immediately offers exciting attacking chances, but leaves the monarch somewhat exposed early on. Mirroring the central pawn creates immediate symmetry, setting the stage for a dynamic pawn structure battle. Opens the path for development and challenges black's central pawn immediately. This principled defense immediately contests the center and prepares development, a crucial early step toward piece activity. Unleashing the Ruy-Lopez, this bishop aims to destabilize black's pawn structure, creating nuanced positional pressure. Probing the bishop's commitment, this pawn advance forces a decision, potentially opening lines for counterplay or creating weaknesses. Preserving the bishop's diagonal pressure on black's queenside structure is paramount, maintaining a flexible setup. Developing the knight here immediately contests white's central pawn and prepares for castling, while also opening lines for potential counterplay. Safeguarding the king is paramount, allowing white to connect rooks and prepare for central expansion without immediate worry. Securing the bishop's retreat and preparing for kingside castling, this move prioritizes development and defensive structure. Securing the e-file while preparing a central pawn push provides crucial space and attacking potential. Black aggressively claims crucial queenside space, forcing white's bishop to retreat and potentially weakening the dark squares. Retreating the bishop consolidates its position and prepares for central pawn advances, maintaining pressure on black's queenside structure. Solidifying the center and preparing to potentially challenge white's bishop on b3 is a prudent step, aiming to gain breathing room. Solidifying the pawn structure, white prepares for d4 and seeks to gain queenside space, creating a more robust central presence. Finally, safeguarding the monarch allows black to address the cramped queenside and perhaps prepare counterplay along the c-file. Preventing any immediate g5 knight maneuver, this pawn advance subtly reinforces the kingside's security. Developing the bishop to the queen's side outpost strengthens the queenside structure and prepares for potential queenside play. Consolidating central pawn structure prepares to challenge black's queenside space advantage. Retreating the knight signals a patient regrouping, preparing to reposition it for central influence after a period of defensive maneuvering. Developing the knight to a less active square suggests a strategic repositioning, perhaps aiming for better central influence or preparation for a kingside pawn storm. Recentering the knight to f8 opens pathways for the c8 bishop and reinforces central pawn structure. Initiating a knight redistribution, the white steed repositions for a central outpost, possibly targeting the kingside. The knight embarks on a circuitous journey, aiming to redeploy to a more active square, likely c5, to contest central space and potentially pressure white's queenside. Re-establishing the bishop's influence on the queenside, preparing for potential queenside expansion. Bringing the rook from the king's flank to the central file fortifies the d-pawn and prepares for potential central breakthroughs. Rerouting the knight to a more active square, aiming to bolster the kingside and potentially pressure the center. Initiating a patient realignment, the bishop retreats to safeguard the king from potential pawn pushes on the queenside and prepares for a more active role later. This pawn thrust immediately challenges black's queenside structure, aiming to seize central space and disrupt the knight's retreat. Rerouting the knight to a more active square, eyeing the kingside and potentially setting up for a future kingside attack. Pivoting the bishop here solidifies the queenside pawn chain, while preparing to reroute the knight towards the kingside for an attack. Establishing a defensive barrier against white's kingside ambitions, this move subtly shores up black's monarch. Chasing black's knights, white aims to gain space and restrict their mobility, but this could lead to an isolated pawn. Unleashing a central pawn thrust opens the position, forcing a critical evaluation of pawn structures and piece activity for both sides. Chasing the e5 pawn with the knight now overloads your defense on the kingside, potentially leaving it exposed. Demolishing the pawn chain creates immediate complications, forcing white to react to the unleashed central dynamic. Unlocking the central tension opens lines and offers white attacking chances. The pawn sacrifice opens vital lines, offering dynamic counterplay and disrupting white's harmonious development. Unlocking the queen's diagonal creates exciting central skirmishes. Black reclaims central influence by challenging white's advanced pawns, aiming to disrupt white's pawn chain. Reclaiming central space, this knight maneuver prepares to pressure black's queen or support an upcoming d4 push. Opening a diagonal for the queen and inviting tactical skirmishes, this pawn grab might lead to a complex battle. Recapturing the pawn opens up a critical diagonal for white's queen. A bold pawn sacrifice, opening diagonals and creating immediate chaos, black invites tactical fireworks. Aimed at disruption, this knight jump sacrifices material for open lines, aiming to dismantle black's pawn structure and create attacking chances. Unleashing the queen seeks to destabilize white's center, though it might expose black's king to immediate threats. Reclaiming the initiative, this queen maneuver surveys the fractured pawn structure, threatening immediate disruption. Trading queens simplifies the position, offering black a more manageable endgame despite the slight material imbalance. Doubling the f-pawns while creating attacking potential exposes the king's path to the center. Securing the pawn majority on the queen side is a calculated risk, potentially opening lines for counterplay but leaving the king exposed. Sacrificing the knight opens a critical diagonal for the queen, aiming to disrupt black's pawn structure. Reclaiming the d-file is paramount, opening lines for potential counterplay against white's isolated pawn. Retrieving the rook opens lines for white's pieces. Recapturing the pawn opens up the b-file, potentially bringing the rook into more active play. Preparing to contest the open c-file after the exchange of queens, seeking to activate its pieces. Re-establishing knight connectivity on the queen side solidifies black's structure, preparing for potential queenside expansion. Re-establishing a knight outpost on a central square offers a solid positional grip. Reclaiming central space and preparing for a pawn storm becomes the priority now. Opening the central d-file now offers a chance to activate your rook and threaten black's vulnerable pawn structure. Asserting control over the center and potential open files, nc5 boldly challenges white's piece coordination. Seizing the open file immediately, preparing to infiltrate black's weakened queenside structure. Seizing the open file offers a momentary advantage, but this knight's outpost on the d-file now appears precarious. Gaining central pawn control after the exchange seems the primary intention now. Knight centralizes, threatening pawns and eyeing the weakened light squares. Capturing the pawn opens up black's king and creates a dangerous passed pawn for white. Seeking counterplay, black aims to exploit white's weakened kingside pawn structure and recapture material advantageously. Recapturing with the bishop aims to alleviate the pressure on white's king and simplify the material. Boldly reigniting the pressure, Ni1 aims to dislodge the entrenched knight and disrupt white's coordination, creating new attacking avenues. Shifting the monarch away from the rook's defensive line, seeking greater safety amidst the potential pawn exchanges. Seizing the initiative, black's knight now eyes critical central squares, disrupting white's coordination. Seizing the open file, this aggressive pawn grab directly challenges black's rook, forcing a difficult decision and disrupting their defensive setup. Reinforcing the weakened pawn structure with this advance is a sound defensive measure against the encroaching knight. Recapturing that pawn opens up potential for a rook on the third rank to become active again. Capturing the bishop unleashes tactical complications, potentially exposing the white king through the open diagonal. Reclaiming the knight reestablishes central pawn structure and prepares a more active piece deployment. The bishop now eyes the e3 knight, aiming to disrupt white's coordinated pieces. Attempting to untangle the pieces and activate the knight on the queen side. Reclaiming the open file by this rook aims to disrupt white's central control and potentially target the pinned knight. Activating the knight for kingside pressure after the exchange offers a dynamic attacking opportunity. Repositioning the bishop to bf8 offers a defensive retreat, preparing to contest the open files should white's rook advance further. Reclaiming the open file offers a vital outpost for the rook, aiming to pressure the weakened queenside structure. Seeking to consolidate the material advantage, the black king ventures cautiously forward amidst the rook's dominion. Reclaiming central files opens up opportunities for knight activity and potential pawn advances. Hoping to create counterplay by advancing the kingside pawns, though it might weaken the king's defense. Centralizing the king offers better defense while preparing for the inevitable pawn advances. Activating the rook on the queenside seeks counterplay, but it might struggle to find active squares. The rook now eyes the vulnerable 7th rank, aiming to sever black's pawn chains and disrupt coordination. Shifting the rook to the queenside aims to disrupt white's pawn majority and potentially create counterplay. The rook abandons the now useless defense of the pawn, seeking a more active role on the 7th rank. Re-establishing a tight defensive screen behind the rook. Activating the knight to the center offers better piece mobility and attacks weaknesses. A final consolidation of forces, seeking to exchange the last of the pawns before the inevitable rook endgame. Exploiting the pin on the knight, this pawn push seeks to disrupt black's coordinated defense and gain central space. The bishop now retreats to a more active diagonal, aiming to hinder white's centralized pieces. Shifting the king towards the center aims to consolidate the position, anticipating a potential endgame scenario.